See,
Hello.
cat. And it's of course, the cat that should be behaving in it. The other one is asleep, like she doesn't care. This one doesn't stop.
She's gonna be a guest as well. That's fine.
Yeah. Oh, she loves when we are in calls. Like she knows the camera is on. Like, see, she always participates in every call because she has a tendency to, oh, you're talking to the computer. It's my time to shine.
All right. So, hi and welcome to Moms, Maths and Manuscripts. And welcome, Sonia. So, today I'm interviewing a friend, a former colleague from one of the places I used to work at. And Sonia is, so she holds a master's degree in biotechnology and PhD in integrative biology and biomedicine. After this PhD, she did a postdoc in Geneva in Switzerland, funded by EMBO. And after that, she decided to leave academia, come back to Portugal, following a much needed detox period, which we are going to talk about. You're not getting away from that. She now works as a freelance scientific writer and science communicator. She is a big Lord of the Rings fan, an avid reader, and a cat lover, which I think we're also going to see evidence of. Welcome, welcome. So happy to see
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me. And yes, definitely there's a cat here, which I hope she doesn't make a mess of it, but she might appear at some point. She's a star. So
I mean, I love that. I love when cats join my yoga classes, when they join podcasts, it's all fine. So, welcome to both of you.
thank you.
I wanted to talk to you about your journey into sort of an alternative career path. You are a science communicator, medical or scientific writer, and you are also a freelancer and kind of you're self-employed, right? So you
Yeah.
are an entrepreneur as well. And I wanted to talk about how academia and transition into entrepreneurship worked for you. But before that, let's start with the basics. Can you tell me a little bit about how you came to science, how you fell in love with science and decided to study it?
Yeah, well, I think it's a very cliche story. I was always a very curious kid, being from, a background where education was highly valuable because none of my parents had gone to college. We grew up with a sense of like, you go and you study so that you don't have to work as hard as we do and we'll make more money. And so I was always very curious. I had a lot of free time. They would buy me books to read because they couldn't really answer all of my 1 million questions. So they would buy me books. I remember being 6 years old and taking a How to Make Babies book to school, like a scientific, properly illustrated book to school. And my parents were called, like, she can't bring those to school because people still believe like it's, the birds and whatever. So it was always a very scientific education in that sense of like, okay, here's a book, you go and you read. Um, I would go into the woods and into my grandparents' garden and collect plants. And we had like this, kids microscope. And of course, I would see everything in it. So I knew I always loved science and nature. And so when it was time to choose a bachelor's, biology was like an easy choice. Actually, I wanted also to be a vet, but then I realized that sometimes vets need to do things that I know I wouldn't be able to do. And so I decided to go into biology because I wanted to, save endangered species. And my dream was to work with the Iberian lynx, which it did make a comeback, but not to me. I've never worked on it.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, so then in my bachelor's, I discovered molecular biology, which I had very little idea about. And I completely fell in love with it. And yeah, and ever since I was like, okay, I want to go to a lab, and I did internships, and that's the path I saw for me.
Okay, so from there you fell in love with the lab and then you realized that, okay, PhD is the right career track for you.
Yeah, well, I went to do a
Yeah.
master's in biotech because I thought I wanted more applied science.
Mm.
I didn't, but I thought so, and that's okay. And then for my thesis, I decided to go back and join an institute was fundamental science, and that's then how I took it for a PhD. It wasn't that straightforward decision because my boyfriend at the time when I met him, he was finishing his PhD and then he did a postdoc. And so I was seeing a lot of the bad side in academia through him and his experience. So I knew it wouldn't be easy, and I wasn't sure if I wanted that for myself. And so the master's in biotech was also a way to like empower me to do more industry and more applied science. But then I had a very big health situation, and I had to undergo a craniotomy. And so, that made me evaluate like, what if I don't live 20 more years? How do I want, why am I fighting to get a career that it's maybe not what I love? Maybe I
Mhm.
should just do what I love for whatever long I have. And
Mhm.
so I decided to do a PhD. And yeah, it turned out okay, I think,
I mean,
after a lot of suffering, but yes.
okay, we will come back to that, but I think from what I remember, from at least the outside perspective, it did look like you were doing okay. I remember you stressed, obviously, as everybody else. I remember you angry from time to time, but I think you were the sort of the image of a person who has their shit together most of the time.
Yeah, I had most of the time my shit together, but it wasn't easy to keep it together.
Yeah, I can relate to that as well. So, can you kind of time travel back to the beginning of your PhD and think, okay, in that moment, how did I imagine the rest of my, or the career that was unfolding in front of me?
Well, I think at the time, because of the health scare that I had, so I had a tumor. It's called a brain tumor in English, but it's not in the brain. Okay, it's in the membranes that protect the brain. So, but it was kind of big. So at the time, I had just undergone this huge surgery and this recovery period and everything. I don't think I was thinking like 20 years ahead, what am I going to
Mhm.
do? I was thinking more like, I'm having fun with this. I'm
Okay.
doing this, whatever. YOLO. It's like,
Yeah.
let's just go. Again, I mean, I was also in a privileged position where, I was paid to do a PhD. So I had some money there and I was living with my boyfriend, so we could support ourselves. So, I mean, we didn't have kids, we didn't have like huge loans, so you can just try and enjoy it. For my PhD, I joined a program that was amazing because you would join the institute and you have 6 months of classes. You're not assigned to any lab, and you have 6 months of classes with all the PIs of the institute. You meet all of them, and you get to decide your own project, and you can create a project. And I fell in love with this idea of bridging two labs. So one where I did my master's working with mosses, and another one where we met, which was the central lab at that institute. And so I was working with centrioles in plants, which no one else does. That creates a particular challenge of being in two labs. People don't know each other. They don't know you. They don't know your project. They don't care about your project because, well, you're the weirdo. Your PIs don't fully understand your project. So, yeah, I don't think I was thinking 20 years ahead. I don't think I thought it through fully. And here comes the cat. I don't think I was thinking it fully, but I knew I loved that project and I did what it took to get it done.
Mhm. How did you navigate you mentioned that PIs don't fully understand it, and you are the one who is bringing together topics that don't kind of mesh at all or didn't at the time. And how did you navigate this relationship? And it was a challenge. I think it was clear also from the outside that it was a challenge.
Yeah, I think you mentioned a lot of me being angry. That's part of it because it looks like you're talking different languages to different people and no one really talks your language. Um, I think it's a particular challenge. Looking back, it was very empowering. And when I was doing my postdoc, I realized that I barely did a PhD. I think I went straight to the postdoc because that's basically it. You're managing your own research, you have your own project, and you're the one who sees everything. Sadly, you're also the one who has to pipette everything. So you have to wear all the multiple hats, which now I also have to wear. So there's something there. I think it's tough. I think it's tough to have one supervisor, so it's double the problem. But it has a good part there that I could escape. Like if at some point, and I had these points where things were not going well with one supervisor, I would run off more towards the other lab. And when things were not good there, I would run off to the other lab.
Mhm.
So you can hop like that, and that helps a little bit. But it does become, I think, tricky that it's very lonely. I think any PhD journey is very lonely, but if it's your own project and you're the one in charge of everything, it's particularly lonely because you cannot expect your PI to fully understand the project, but
Mhm.
also that that project will be a priority to him or her, right? Because it's not. You're not bringing in the funding. They are actually putting money on you. And like, okay, if there's a paper, their name goes on it, but it's not their pet project. It's your pet
Mhm.
project, and it's not their priority. It's yours. And I think that was a challenge there that was hard to navigate.
I mean, yeah, I do think that managing one person, managing one manager, one supervisor is already tough, and then you had two. And I think from my memory, they were both not the easiest. So, but I think you really navigated that with a lot of grace, as far as I remember. But okay, let's go there. So my memory of you is first of all that since you were bringing these two topics and you were the only one in the Central lab who was working with plants, nobody else was. I never worked with plants, and I come to the lab and then, there's a person who's talking about plants, and I'm like, okay, but you managed to explain everything. So my thinking already at the time was like, okay, she does a great job presenting and communicating these things and making it understandable, making it easier for somebody who has no idea about none of these things. Since like I'm fresh, I'm not really a cell biologist, I'm not a centriole person, I'm not a plant person. At the beginning, especially, I was very unsure of what was going on around me. And you made it very easy to follow your presentations always. So, maybe already back then there was like some glimpses of future in science communication. And another thing, my impression was always that, yeah, you are super disciplined. I remember the stories of how like you lived far away from the institute and you would work on a bus, on the boat, or on all the means of transportation that it took you to get to the institute. And I was like, wow, she's really disciplined and she's really amazing. Like the work ethics are just incredible. And then, yeah, as I mentioned, I thought that you were always very like collected and calm, apart from very rare signs of anger and frustration. So, but I mean, it is, I guess, a facade. And you did mention that most of the time you kept your stuff together, but not all the time. And what else was going on behind this? Did you ever regret doing that? Did you ever thought, okay, maybe this was not a choice that I thought through very well? Or was it, as you mentioned before, just I'm having fun with it and I'm going to continue to have fun as much as I can?
Yeah, so I didn't always live far from the institute. In the beginning of my PhD, I was living like 40 minutes away, and I realized that was too close.
Mm.
So I didn't have that discipline at the beginning. I was going from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. to the lab and working on weekends. This was also because, so it's a 4-year PhD, but one of the supervisors was a bit more skeptical of the project. And so she gave me 1 year. She said, I'm going to sign the paper for 1 year. If after 1 year you don't have enough data, I'm killing your project. And I was very naive and I said, yeah, sure. I mean, ignore that the plant takes 3 months to grow and 3 more months to have transgenics on it. But like, yeah, sure, go. And so I was working a lot and I was working weekends. And it doesn't actually make the plants grow any faster. It does give you a lot of time to read. And I think this was very critical, the fact that I was the only one bringing both expertise. You have to make sure you know enough for both fields of knowledge and you have to bring it together. And so I was reading a lot. And so one of the labs would only work in plants. So this is Arabidopsis and Physcometrium. That's the plant I worked on. And then the other lab would work on human cells, flies, yeast, well, plants. Do you remember anything else? Am I missing something?
Well, we had the mice muscle cells.
Mice, yeah, that's what you did. Yeah. And so like we work on everything. So I had to read on everything. And then I was not a centriole person, so I had to read a lot on centrioles. And centrioles have a million proteins who have weird names, and they have different names in different species. And this was horrible. And so I was definitely reading a lot. But by I think the end of my first year or year and a half, I decided we were living too close to the lab for me. My boyfriend decided to leave academia at the time without any like plan B. So on my salary, we couldn't afford to live in Lisbon. So we had to move somewhere else. And then I always wanted to come closer to home. I mean, this looks like I was very far away. I was like 40 minutes away by car.
Mhm.
It was not super far away, but it's just across the river. And I decided, okay, then I want to move back closer to my family and my friends. And so we moved back here, actually just on the other side of the street. And yeah, and that made going to the lab a bit harder. So I was taking 1 hour and a half. It was a bus, a boat, and a train. And it's a challenge to make them all work together. So they work together on specific periods of the day, so that those were the periods I could go and come back to
Yeah.
make sure it was only 1 hour and a half commute. I was very disciplined and I still am, also because as a teenager, I took up Taekwondo. So this is a martial art.
Mm.
Um, and I think you do learn to be disciplined. It is part of, it's a martial art. So And it does impact how you see things and how you, I think, organize your thoughts in that way. Also, at the time, I went back to it, and I think it was a great thing for my mental health.
Mhm.
After a very stressful day in the lab, I could go and punch and kick people and bags. And I know you do yoga. I'm sure that's also a very nice way to relieve your stress. I'm more into kicking things. Um,
I get it. I
yeah,
get it. Yeah.
and so that was also great. I think another thing that was great, and I'm not sure I valued it as much at the time, is having people and friends in a community who are not science related. So I would
Mhm.
go. So my family, they're not science trained at all. So I was the first one to go to college, and my sister, even though she's older, she went after me. She took management. So there's no science there. So we never talk necessarily science. I mean, sometimes, but it's because they are asking me stuff. In my taekwondo practice, no one was scientifically trained. So people do whatever kind of normal jobs,
Mhm.
and your job is not really part of that equation. And
Yeah.
so I think it was great to have those hours where I wasn't a scientist. I was just there to kick people and, feel good about myself. But the lab didn't have a space there. And
Mhm.
I left my toxicity, at the door, and
Mhm.
I was a
Mhm.
different person there. And I think that was very good to compartmentalize. The commute, yeah, I used to work, I was reading a lot and working a lot during the commute time. But there was also a strategy to make sure that whenever I got home, I had done enough. So when I would be home, I would be home. From Monday to Friday, I could do that. On the weekends, it was more complicated. But at least, whenever I would walk into my house, the lab would stay outside. Of course, some of the problems still come. And yeah, it was not an easy time. Also, like with my boyfriend being unemployed, navigating as well a transition into whatever we didn't know at the time. It was challenged. It was a very challenging period, but um, I somehow managed.
I mean, I'm now listening to you and thinking, yeah, wow, it was a lot, a lot, a lot, and you also didn't really show it that much. I think you didn't bring, you managed to, as you said, compartmentalize and didn't bring
Yeah.
the home stuff into the lab, but also it's pretty amazing, and I think it's pretty rare that you manage to kind of, as much as possible, to leave lab at the door of your house, and when you go home, you don't bring work with you. Maybe, yeah, working during your commute helped there, but also I imagine that taekwondo helps, or any sort of scheduled physical activity helps to kind of draw this boundary between work and your personal life, that you sort of leave these thoughts aside for the evening.
I
Yeah.
think compartmentalize was something that I always did very well.
Hmm.
I think it's great to a certain point. I think we oversell it that, oh, it's amazing. You live your, personal life at home and the lab life in the lab. It's great, except you tend to forget that you are human. You're operating as a machine. You have this software open or that software. You open this app and you close that app. It works for a certain period of time,
Hmm.
but it's not necessarily a healthy way of working. And I do think, although it has been very good for me, and I have that tendency to do that, it makes you less empathic to people because you can do that and you expect other people to do that.
Hmm.
And you think, oh, I'm doing it right because I don't bring my problems to another place. But you're kind of like operating as a machine and not as a human because you're just blocking the emotions,
Yeah.
you know. So it is good at some points, but it's also like good to operate differently. And
Hmm.
I did learn that eventually.
So when did that realization come in? How did that happen?
I think that happened a bit with COVID and then a lot during my postdoc. So I finished my PhD in 2021. So yeah, it took me a bit longer because I don't know if you heard there was this pandemic that
Mm.
closed down the world. And actually lockdown came, I think we started lockdown on a Friday and I had just transformed the last plants on Monday. And so I was doing transgenic plants, so you have to transform them, and then it's three months of selection rounds, and then they take 3 months to grow. So it's like a 6 month plan. And so I had to have a meeting with my supervisor and be like, okay, either we continue or I just go home and write. And there was a point where things aligned and I managed to continue in the way that, like, I had just got my driver's license a few months back and we had a car and my boyfriend was working with kids at the time had to stay home. So the schools were closed. So I had the car, so I could take the car so that I wouldn't go by public transportation. And I managed to keep up working in the lab as much as possible and only when needed. I think COVID was a tough challenge for me. I think I was, again, very lucky. And I am very privileged that we have a two-bedroom apartment. And so we have a home office.
Mm-hmm.
And we had that at the time already. And we have, a green park just on the back side of the house. And so, like, there is green to see. And so, I was privileged that I had a car, that I could take the car to work, that I managed to work. I live close to my family. So I also knew, like, if something was needed, I could go there.
Mm-hmm.
I know that not everyone had that. It was a scary time for me because obviously it's a virus that also goes to the brain, and I'm very conscious of my health now, but I managed to focus on my PhD. That helped a lot as well.
Mm-hmm.
But, seeing the world around kind of makes you break a bit that barrier of what's home and what's the lab. Also, I think people were more talking about these challenges at the
Mm-hmm.
time, and people were more understanding if you had kids at home. I don't know how people were managing anything.
Yeah.
Um, so I think people were more understanding then. And I think that helped me to understand as well other people's struggles. Um, Again, seeing how privileged I was, that if my parents or my grandparents needed something, I could just go, being lucky that my boyfriend was at home. So I had someone, to cook for me and clean for me. When you're finishing a PhD, that's priceless.
Mm-hmm.
I also tend to forget, I still do that a lot. I enter full focus mode on my brain and I forget to eat when I'm working.
Okay.
And so I can be in the computer 10 hours a day and forget to eat or to go to the toilet. And that's something I gained through video gaming. It's amazing. You do get a lot of things done. And I wrote my PhD thesis in 6 weeks uh,
Gosh.
because I barely left the computer. I slept and that was it. But because I had a boyfriend who would cook and bring me the food or call me to the table and be like, no, now you're doing this,
Mm-hmm.
and that helps. That helps a lot. And you start to see the struggle that other people are going through. And then during my postdoc, so I did a postdoc in Geneva, so I moved away. I knew I wanted to have that experience for myself to move away, but it was also a bit of a career move because in Portugal, sadly, if you want a job, you still have to go abroad and get experience abroad because we only value people who come from abroad. And so I did that. I went to Geneva in 2021, and my boyfriend stayed with the cats. He's allergic to cats, but well, that's it. You sometimes just have to do these sacrifices. And I left him and the cats behind, and I went to Geneva alone. I got an EBO fellowship to do cryo-EM, which is something I really wanted to do. And that was, I think, I don't want to say a mistake because I don't think it was a mistake, but it was definitely not what I expected. So I interviewed in the lab and I did all the necessary background checks. I talked off the record with people who had left the lab. I talked with people who were in the lab. I talked with other PIs who knew those PIs. I did everything and it all looked good on paper. And I do not necessarily think it's a bad lab or a toxic lab. I think it was a bad lab for me and a toxic lab for me.
Mm-hmm.
I think we also tend to label things as toxic or bad, but sometimes it's the fit with you.
Yeah.
I know that the lab we met was also labeled as bad and toxic and competitive. And sometimes it was, but I think it was also certain people that were that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because there were other people, and we had a blast at some point. I mean, I remember we doing a lot of escape rooms, and
Mm-hmm.
but you have to find the people where with that work, and sometimes
Yeah.
in the lab environment there's more that. Also, because if you have one PI for 17 people, I mean, time is limited.
Mm-hmm.
And so it draws more that competitive side of people. In my lab in Geneva, when I interviewed, it was a somewhat small lab. There was two or three people who I immediately connected to in the interview. But when I joined the lab, those people had left or were leaving, and the lab was full French. And nothing against French people, was just I was not prepared to be the only non-French speaker in the lab. Everyone had told me Geneva is very international, you're going to have no problems.
Mm-hmm.
Right, but you live in a lab where everyone speaks French all the time. And I'm sure you know this because you were in Portugal and you at the time spoke not Portuguese. And so
But I
Even
think,
though, yeah,
sorry to interrupt, I think you guys were doing great at that because also, I mean, there were other non-Portuguese speakers, but I have that experience as well in Paris that
yeah,
I was the only person who didn't speak French and it was suffocating at times. Yeah, so I feel.
yeah, exactly. I think we tried to do that, and I apologize if sometimes we failed. But yeah, I think in Geneva I had that I joined full French lab, and at the time I was the only one not speaking French in the same office where they were speaking French. And that's
Mhm.
fine as long as they're not saying your name in a conversation. So at some point they were talking French about me and I was in the room. And the thing with Portuguese and French is I don't fully understand, but I understand enough. So at some points in the conversation, I had to look back and say, look, I am understanding what you're saying. It's like, if you want to talk shit about me, talk it somewhere else or talk it to my face. Like, don't do this mean thing. But then I decided I'm going to learn French. So I did French courses and French Duolingo. I actually finished French Duolingo.
Oh my
There's
God,
actually an end to it.
there
I'm so
is.
far, there is, and I'm so far the only person I know who got there. There is an end to it. I do understand French now. Speaking is a completely different story.
Mhm.
But I also gave up on it because at some point more foreigners started to join the lab, but also because I was trying to speak French to lab people. And they were like, oh, we don't understand you. We don't understand you. And at some point, my supervisor said, can you say it in English? I really don't understand what you mean. And I said, and he said, I see the problem now. You don't have a French accent. And this is your supervisor, who is the person who is in charge of, making you feel welcomed. And they have all to gain from having a good lab environment. And at that point, I was like, you know what? I give up. I don't care anymore.
Yeah.
I'm never going to have a French accent because I'm not French, right? Like I don't have a British accent. I don't have an American accent because I'm not from those places. That's fine. And so there was like I was really upset.
Hmm.
Also, I joined lab to do cryo-EM. I think 2 months after the cryo-EM technician quit, and so it was 9 months before I could start doing some cryo-EM. I moved there just to do that. And I was there for 9 months without being able to do anything of my project. And you know me, I'm very driven and I did my own PhD pet project. I cannot be there looking at the walls,
Yeah.
especially when you have no friends and no social life and your whole network is in Portugal and you're there alone. You know no one and you don't speak the language and you have nothing to do.
Hmm.
Right. So it was very, very, very bad. Then I managed to get COVID for the first time. I got COVID in 2022. So I managed to made it up until there without getting infected or
Hmm.
testing positive at least. And that was the time I still had to be locked in my tiny apartment for 10 days straight. So that was another challenge. And that's when I started therapy because I was like, I'm going crazy.
Hmm.
Looking back, I probably should have started therapy way before. But yeah, but that was the time where I realized that I couldn't compartmentalize my entire life
Hmm.
because I couldn't, I was away in Geneva. Portuguese problems still made it there. I tried that my problems there wouldn't make it back home, but it's hard. You're away, you have no one to talk to.
Yeah.
So it was complicated. My boyfriend was also in a complicated position where the company he was at was going bankrupt. So those problems get to you, and compartmentalizing them doesn't help. And although it's easier in a way when you're away because you're not physically in the place,
Hmm.
it's harder to turn them off because you're not physically in the place to support the people.
Yeah.
And it was very exhausting. I was traveling every like 2 to 3 weeks and only by plane. So my carbon
Hmm.
footprint was off the roof. And then airline companies are a mess and flights get delayed all the time.
Hmm.
And it's so stressful and it's so tiring. And at some point was just not really working for me.
Yeah.
Sadly, because by the end I had a couple of like there's a group of international people, the lab grew a lot. So there was this group of internationals. We were all together doing our stuff. We had a lot of social things. And I think by my second year there, like second part of my second year, I was having a blast. Not in the lab, not work-wise. Work-wise was getting better,
Hmm.
but I think I was done with it. I think I was just like sort of gave up on it. But my social life there was amazing and I had friends. It was very, very hard to leave by the end of being
Hmm.
there. But it was clear to me that my life was back home.
Yeah.
And that academia wasn't worth it. It's not worth, for me, it wasn't worth my life. And it was not bringing the best in me. I also started to realize something that I think I always knew, but I always knew and I always thought I could do it, but then I couldn't, which is you have to be, I think, more aggressive with your publications. You have to
Mm.
fight for them. You have to fight for the impact factor. You cannot just wait for the data to stand for itself.
Mhm.
And I do believe that there's value just in that, and you don't have to sell your work.
Mhm.
I don't like, that's a whole different conversation, but I don't like the impact factor game. I don't even like the publication game.
Mhm.
I absolutely hate the networking game, even though I have a good network and a lot of people knew me in the field. And yeah, I probably had what it take in terms of network. And if I was okay with continuing playing aggressively, I could probably make it. But I realized that the person I would become was not the person I wanted to be.
Yeah.
Like Sonia, the professor, would not be the Sonia that I want to be.
Mhm.
And I would have to sacrifice more of my life, and I just wasn't up to do it.
So this realization came during your time in Switzerland,
Yeah.
or was it already kind of brewing in your PhD, would you
I
say?
think it was brewing by the end of my PhD. So I
Mhm.
also started to do some non-academic stuff by that time, or not PhD related stuff by that time, because I was already unsure if I wanted to stay in academia or not. But it was COVID time. It was the end of a PhD, which is a whole very specific kind of hell. And I was like, no, this is because I'm tired of my PhDs, because I'm tired of the world. It's because I'm tired of COVID. It's just, I'm still going to go and I'm still going to try.
Mhm.
And I knew I wanted to have the experience abroad. I think personal wise, it's a good experience to have. It's hard, but you grow a lot.
For
And I
sure.
think I think it empowers you a lot. Now I know I can make it on my own if I need to. I don't want to need to, but if I
Mhm.
do need, I can make it. And I learned to travel by myself. Before I was traveling for work, but I having a Swiss salary, you can just go and hop on a plane and go and visit your friends because
Yeah.
anywhere else in Europe is cheap.
Yeah.
Um, and so that was very fun. I traveled a lot. You know, by myself, and that's very empowering. But I realized that, yeah, academia wasn't bringing the best in me. It was bringing a more aggressive person. It was bringing a more competitive person. I didn't want to be like that.
Mhm.
So I think there was a point, I think the postdoc was just the point where I had to kind of choose if I wanted to sacrifice more of my personal life and play that game, or if I wanted to say, you know what, that's enough. I tried and it's not who I want to be.
Mhm. Definitely, academic career is a lot of politics and bureaucracy, and you are not, at some point, you're not maybe as much of a scientist as you were dreaming to be, doing the actual work that, I don't know, improves the world, helps people in some way. You're just writing and maybe kissing up to somebody, right? A lot of the time. So
But
you,
that's the part I love. What I do love, sorry to interrupt you, is the writing part. I love writing. I
yeah,
loved writing my thesis. I love writing my paper. I love creating projects. I actually don't enjoy that much the bench work or data analysis.
okay,
Yeah, so that was not a problem for me. The politics were a big problem for
yeah,
me. Kissing up to someone's ass, it's not something I can do. But yeah, it really crashes against some of my values of honesty, of integrity, of being more cooperative and less competitive. And that's not academia these days. Maybe it is in some places. And I have nothing against people who want to play those games and who publish Nature, Cell, and Science. And some people will say, we just didn't publish there, so that's why you left. But it's just that I didn't necessarily want to publish there. I cannot, and that's a whole different conversation that I actually had with some people in Nature. I cannot justify 10K for a paper. I'm sorry, I can't. As a
hmm
as a PhD student, my salary was 12K a year, and I remember when I joined the lab, my PhD lab, we were paying 16K for a paper, which was more than 1 year PhD student in Portugal, in a
yeah,
European country. We are not talking about other countries in the world, where it can be even more. Like we cannot expect people to pay these amounts and to
yeah,
have a nature paper all shining the CV. That actually means nothing in the end. And so yeah, so I started to see that academia, I think therapy also helped a lot, that I was fighting for a career that actually doesn't go towards my values. It doesn't go
Mm,
towards the life I want to have. So what I was fighting for a dream that 17-year-old Sonia had, but that 27 or 28-year-old Sonia didn't have anymore, but didn't
yeah.
realize that it wasn't her dream anymore.
Yeah. And maybe 17-year-old Sonia had that dream without fully realizing all the implications of it, right? So then once you knew it, and it's good that you realized early enough, in a sense, that it doesn't go along, it doesn't align with your values, what you want your life to be, how you want to feel. It's amazing. I think a lot of people
Mm.
realize it much later.
I mean, 13-year-old Sonia wanted to go into the wild and save species until she realized that involves a lot of mud and you have to go even if it's rainy and cold. So, yeah, I can't even do bird watching.
Yeah,
So, yeah.
fair. So once you know more, then the dream changes. That's all right. So, okay, you knew that you didn't want to be a professor. You knew that that kind of track doesn't align with your values. You did mention that you liked writing, so I think this is a good segue into your career now. Was it always the case that you loved communication and writing, or you realized it as you were writing your thesis?
I think I always knew, in a way, as you say, like looking at my presentations, I always made sure everyone could follow. I always, I was also always careful with that. I did some science communication things as a volunteer during my PhD, and I actually liked it. I didn't consider doing it a career. But yeah, I knew like when I was writing my master thesis, I loved it. When I was writing my bachelor's thesis, I loved it. I think it comes with also, I love reading. I always loved reading since I was 4 or 5 when I first learned how to read, which was super early. I loved reading and I've read big pieces like Lord of the Rings when I was 8 and 9. So, I'm very big fantasy reader, which is kind of like science in a way. And it has their own jargon and their own things.
Mm-hmm.
But I always loved writing. At least I remember since writing my bachelor's thesis that I realized I like that. I think it comes a lot with I like reading and I sometimes read papers for fun.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's fun to learn things. And so I think that was a part that I knew I always enjoyed. I did enjoy writing my thesis. I would love to have done it in 6 months and not 6 weeks, because it was a very tight schedule there. But I still loved it. I still love the process. And although it's now closed in my bookshelf and never to be opened again, it's there and I've written it. So,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I knew that that was something I wanted. And I knew that was something I wanted as a career. I didn't necessarily knew medical writing,
Mm-hmm.
but the first thing I looked for was journal editing. If I cannot write papers, I'm going to evaluate them on the other side.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I was lucky. I had, my PIs at the time put me in contact with some editors. I went to the MBL several times on conferences, and I met editors there. And I was EMBO fellowship, so I also knew some people at EMBO. Problem with all of that is I knew I wanted to come back to Portugal. And even though with COVID we learned about home office and remote work, I think the legal aspect of it is not so clear. And even in places like the EU, you cannot easily work in Germany and live in Portugal.
Mm-hmm.
This has to do with insurances and stuff like that, which I find ridiculous nowadays. But most places I would have to be based in Germany or the UK. And that was not an option for me.
Mm-hmm.
And so there were very few publishers that would allow me to be in Portugal, either very, very tiny and not really good quality, or something like the big, big ones. Some of them would probably allow me, but I also not sure I wanted to go there.
Mm-hmm.
So I had to look somewhere else.
And then you realized that somewhere else would be doing it by yourself.
Well, there was a long time. So when I decided to leave Geneva, I decided to stay until the end of my contract because I don't quit things. That's another bad thing that I'm trying to change now, is learning how to quit things,
Mm-hmm.
because I just suck it up and continue with them even when they're not good for me.
Mm-hmm.
And so I left Geneva, and another good part about having a Swiss salary is that you can save money. And so you mentioned the detox period, because I felt like I have money to just do nothing for a bit. I moved back home in April, and so I just took like the summer. Said I had a summer in Portugal that I wasn't working. I don't particularly love summer, I must say, and I don't really like to be a lizard on the sand. But it was nice to have summer off because then other people are on holidays and you can meet your friends and you can go. And it was nice to reconnect to people. It was very, very nice to reconnect with myself. One thing that academia took from me was all my hobbies. It was lab, 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 and you forget, to do your thing. I was reading a lot, but I was reading a lot of papers. Only when I went back to Geneva and had no social life, I went back to reading books because I had no social life. And I realized like there needs to be a middle term here. But through going back to books, I connected with like 5 or 6 year old Sonia, like, I love this. And I reread Lord of the Rings. I'm actually rereading it now again. I have problems. But yeah, and it's very different to read a book as a kid or as an adult. And I reconnected to that and I reconnected to why I love reading. So I'm going to read more. Then I did this detox period and then I took a month to like, okay, I'm going to see what else is out there. And there's a lot of things out there. Once you go on LinkedIn, once you go on just like Google and you Google like Living Academia, there's podcasts, there's blogs, there's coaches. I didn't took up any coaching, but there's plenty of coaching out there for people who want to invest on that. There is a lot of free things, free resources. There is, as I say, blog posts, podcasts. There's a lot of things. There's a lot of things explaining all the different careers. I don't like the term alternative career. I was also using it until I saw the numbers and I saw actually a post on LinkedIn to say that leaving academia is not the alternative career. Actually, staying in academia is the alternative career because actually most people leave academia.
Yeah.
So, of course, there's a whole variety of things we go to do, but yeah, but it's not necessarily an alternative. It's just something else you do. And, you know, of course, I reached out to some of my friends here and my previous supervisors, and they were like, yeah, but I'm sure we can find you something here. People are always looking for postdocs. And like, except I don't want to go back to a lab. Thank you. I can. And it's good to have the option. Like, if I have to pay the bills, then I can just, go for a postdoc and get some money until I find something else. But because I had some money from Switzerland, I could just relax for a bit and try to figure out what it was. And there's so many options. It's so overwhelming. There's too many options. Some of them I knew were not very realistic in Portugal. Like there's not a lot of big industry. There's a couple of small biotech companies, and I did apply to a couple of those, but it's hard because either they are too pharma and my background is more plants, or even if they are plants, I don't have the main like biotech plant experience. I work in a moss, so like no one really cares. And then I did cryo-EM in fundamental science, and so people don't really care about it. And so I was a bit lost, and I was applying to everything and nothing, and just I think we all have that period of job hunting where you apply to absolutely everything, and you just get rejected from, I would say, half. The other half, they don't even reply to you, and and it's just devastating. But through all of my search and all of my blog posts and all the newsletters I subscribe to and all of the resources, it's really a lot, some things did resonate with me. And at some point on LinkedIn, I was just like, I don't know, scrolling. And I saw this free event in Lisbon.
So we will leave it here for today, leaving it on a bit of a cliffhanger. Our conversation with Sonia was very long, and I think it was very interesting and full of little bits of advice and bits of wisdom that you have to hear. So I decided to split it into two parts, so it's a bit of an easier listen. And the second part is where Sonia goes into more details of how she transitioned from an academic career or her soul-searching break into a freelance scientific writing career. And it's a bit more practical, a bit more hands-on, and I hope you enjoy this conversation, the continuation of this conversation, as much as this part one. For now, thank you for listening. I'll see you back here for part two very soon.